Welcome, Terra, to the podcast.
Thank you.
I'm so excited to have you on.
Hey, I'm excited to be here. I get to talk for like a long time.
We're going to do that. We're going to talk about all the things today, all things weddings.
Amazing.
Yes, as a wedding photographer, I feel like naturally a lot of brides follow me, and the topic of conversation is always how hard it is to plan a wedding. And I really want to break it down today and make it a little bit less daunting for people because I feel like it's a lot of small details that add up to just be like this overarching, stressful thing.
Yeah. Well, and the stakes are high because you hope that you only do this once.
Yes.
And you want it done right.
Yes.
And you want it done well.
Absolutely. Yeah. So you just have all this pressure and the pressure to not be a bridezilla. And it's like, if you speak your mind, then you're automatically labeled a bridezilla. And I'm like, no, that term just needs to be like right out the window.
100%.
Yeah.
I mean, we're dynamic, we're humans. So like it's normal to have all the emotions too.
Absolutely.
In it.
Yeah. And it's one of the most important, days of your life. I can understand how somebody, they should be, particular about their wedding day because it's a really important day. So introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself and what inspires you to become a wedding planner.
So I love this question. So my name is Terra Nickelson. I own Planet Terra Wedding Planning and Design. So we're like a small wedding planning company based out of mid-Missouri, but we service couples throughout the entire state. So like this calendar year alone, we're in Branson, St. Louis, Kansas City, and mid-Mo. So next year, like we're in Springfield and have potentially an opportunity to go to California, which would be awesome.
Fun.
So that's, So, and I own the business and I am the one that works directly with my clients on all things planning and design. And then I have a team that comes on site to help support the event.
Yeah.
So,
Nice. We were just talking about that before we hit record is the importance of, they're hiring you and you really want to foster those relationships with your clients. And that's what's most important.
Yes. So and then you asked about how I got into this or why or whatnot. So I'll be 100% frank that never in my wildest dreams did I think I would be doing this.
Really?
Not at all. Never was ever on my radar. I definitely was not the little girl that dreamed of her wedding.
Me either.
You didn't?
No,
Never.
I didn't.
Like I certainly like watched like wedding shows, like like a Say Yes to the Dress or whatever. But it was, and maybe it has to do with a little bit of I didn't really like date or anything until I was like outside of college. I didn't have like a real boyfriend really, and so like it was like such a far off, whatever.
Yeah,
so
that makes sense.
So. My background is in fashion marketing and management. So what I wanted to do in college was produce high fashion runway shows. So I helped out with like theater productions in high school. I did student council. I was dance and special events chair. Have naturally always been like in a leadership role or creative. Like I was always in art class and all those things. And went to college, thought I was going to do this. I worked at Victoria's Secret
This
throughout
all
college.
makes sense, by the way, because your dress is adorable, your earrings and your lipstick match. I'm like, this all makes sense. She's fashion forward.
I've always loved fashion. I actually just rewatched Devil Wears Prada the other day because I heard they're making a sequel, and I was like, I just love this movie.
It's classic.
But anyway, so like I worked at Victoria's Secret, and when I was in college, I wanted to do their fashion show. Of course, and then I ended up interning at Victoria's Secret. And long and short, when you're 21, you don't really know anything about the world or anything.
You think you do, but you don't.
Yeah. So I did that, whatever, that all didn't work out. So did a lot of odds and ends, retail jobs, sales jobs. And then I ended up as an assistant loan officer for a big mortgage company that specializes in VA home loans. And so obviously I'm in your house. So I assume you own your house, and buying a house is a process. It's a lot of money. It's time consuming to buy. You sometimes, depending if you have like a clean file, it's a lot of intrusive questions your loan officer asks of you.
Yeah,
and
very
they want to
personal.
know. They want to know everything about why you're transferring money and
every dollar that you have.
Yep.
Every dollar of debt too.
My borrowers would joke about me needing to take like their firstborn. I'm like, basically, I almost need your firstborn for you to buy this home. But anyways, so I did that. I really enjoyed it. Was in the weeds of helping people buy homes. We're talking, $250,000, $300,000, and really enjoyed it. But it wasn't creative. So this kind of opportunity transpired where I was able to get a job as like an event coordinator within that company's internal events team. So I took that job on. So anything from like internal retreats, supporting like their big company wide, like family campouts. Like I helped support all of those things. And then at the same time, there was a gal that I knew from high school that had started her own planning company. And I just randomly reached out and said, "Are you looking for a day of help?" And she said, "Actually, I am." And so started working for her. So I had these two of doing corporate events and then doing weddings.
Working for her.
Yep.
Yeah.
Very part-time. I mean, I did like timelines and I kind of became like a lead.
I'm seeing
with
how
that.
this is all like culminating
Yeah.
together, like your like creative side, but also your corporate side. And I feel like with weddings, you really need both.
Yes. It's, and you know, working with corporate, it's, a lot of chain of command or, you know, there's a lot of start and stop. And then like in weddings, there's less of that. So I had all this and then decided I didn't really like corporate. There were some other things that I didn't really care for. The person I worked for, I asked, "You have full-time opportunities?" It was a very young company at the time. And yes, but the terms I didn't agree with, this is my personality. The terms I didn't agree with. And, this tells a lot about my personality. You can cut this. And I don't mean any ill from this individual, but basically it was, "Come work for me, sign a non-compete. I can only give you 8 hours a month, but you're going to like build my business." And then she would still have her full-time job. And I said, I looked at my husband,
8 hours?
and I was like, because she's like, "I think this will really grow into something." And I was like,
Yeah.
Pump the brakes. No, not doing that. Not signing a non-compete for something that's not even like a full-time salary.
Correct.
So I said, "Well, I guess I'm going to do this."
Yeah, that's very, very smart
Very
of you.
arrogant of me. At
No, very smart of
26
you.
or whatever I was.
Because a lot of people will take advantage of your time just to build their business. And you're right. Like it wasn't a full time. So it's like you don't owe anything to her. You should, at the end of the day, like you have to look out for yourself, especially in business.
Yeah.
And it's paid off for you.
It has paid. I look back because this individual isn't really doing it hardly at all. And I had like this gut feeling way back when that I thought, this person has a full-time job still and they want me to help build the business, but they're not really invested in it. And I was like, there's just no way. So anyways, there's no bad mouth or anything.
That's
Just kind of how I got here. It was a total accident that I got here, but certainly reflecting back on, you know, my original desire as an 18-year-old was doing high fashion runway shows. There's a lot of overlap in the wedding industry to fashion shows, in terms of, like production and the time commitment, and like you only can do it once. So you want to make sure it's done well and done right.
Absolutely. And attention to detail, color coordination, everything.
And a lot of people, I mean, especially at the time when Victoria's Secret fashion show was like in its peak, I mean, you're talking about live performers and there's all the things that go behind the scenes of like red carpets and like goodie bags. And there's a lot of things. You're working with hair and makeup teams and quick changes and all of that. But, you know, I think this feels like a good space to be in because this sounds bad, not bad, but, now I can say this as like in my 30s is what I'm doing in weddings matters more than putting on a fashion show.
Yeah.
Like,
100%.
I mean, I still love fashion. I still love it. Like I still keep up with like all of that, but
it's a luxury. I mean, the weddings are a luxury to an extent, but the meaning behind them is different than just purely fashion and just show. Weddings are about family and love and like two families coming together 100%. To create a life. So
yes, it matters.
Yeah, it matters
a lot more. And, you know, depending on like the size of the wedding, I've certainly have had the opportunity to work on weddings that feel more of like a production in terms of like more, you know, more vendors, like the design is super involved. Like we're doing something like crazy with like the catering and like serving like desserts, like a la mode to the guests. So I still get to flex it, but then I have like really sweet, like simple weddings that they still care about how it looks and feels, but they're not spending
And that's
a
the
lot
great
of
thing
money on
about
it.
weddings is that there's two different boards to it. It can be really extravagant and big, or it can be really small and intimate. And it really just depends on the couple. So depending on, well, no matter what the couple wants, whether they want a small wedding or a big one, what is your advice? Like, what are the 3 things they should focus on when they first get engaged?
3 things. Gosh. So just what the couple should focus on.
Yeah. For their first plan of attack, like right after they get engaged.
Yeah, I certainly think,
Because I feel like they just don't know where to start.
yeah, I mean, what I'm gonna say as a planner is I think they should
Hire a planner.
consider even just like talking to a planner.
Yeah.
At least what I've noticed as I've been doing this longer is people don't know what it takes to plan an event or even just like the cost of it. So then I'm sure, as like a wedding photographer, you probably have spent many a times people inquiring and then they're kind of like shell shocked at like pricing. Or whatever. And I just think it's a disservice to everybody if you don't really know. And they shouldn't know because, they've never done this. Most likely they haven't done it before.
I always say that this is the first time you've ever done this. Do not say sorry. No question is stupid. You do not know. And that's why hiring a professional, like you said, I would agree with you. Like the first thing you should really do is like get with your partner one-on-one and talk about what your guys' like importances are. Instead of bringing in family members and anybody on the outside, at least sit down and be like, this is what we dream for our wedding day. And then talking to a planner that can guide you through that process.
Yes. And I guess I should include that, you asked about 3 things. I do think like the planning side is important. Even if like if somebody wanted to hire me, just like do a consult with me and just kind of like pick my brain. Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Like I want to help people so that they feel good about the decisions that they're making.
That's a good point.
But I do think what you said of what are their kind of goals or like have tos in the celebration? Because I've certainly been on consults where I do ask them, tell me like, what's like kind of like your vision? Like, what do you want when you look back at your pictures? Like, what do you want to see in those pictures? And when the couple, like when I ask and they don't really know, I'm like, okay, like before you start spending money and signing contracts, like really think about what, when you look back 30 years, what do you want to see? What do you want to experience? Because I think that will help you decide, are we doing this local? Are we destination?
Yeah. Are we eloping? Are we
doing 100 people or like all those things? Then of course, no one likes to talk about money, but I do think that's really important too. Cause I'm the thing that I think I see about like the Gen Zs are like, and I have peers that do this too. They're like, I can't believe what people spend. Like I would just put a down payment on a home. And I'm like, that's great. Like so great. So like, I think you need to have those conversations of like,
correct.
Is that more of a priority?
Mm-hmm.
If not, like, how much are we willing to spend? Who are the stakeholders in this? Is it mom, dad, grandparent, whomever
that's
wants
true.
to
Like,
say?
do you have the luxury of having somebody that's helping you fund this? Are you funding this fully on your own? Like, those are great questions to ask.
Yeah, I do think it is hard. And this is such a individualized how to handle this goes, but not everyone maybe has like everyone's relationship with their parents or whomever their parent figure is or grandparent, whomever is different. Cause I've certainly worked with couples where like dad writes a check and says, hey, here's this amount of money,
go, sweetie,
whatever you want to do, whatever you want. And then I have some couples that a parent will heavily scrutinize everything that happens.
And then you almost don't want their help because you want to honor your own wishes. And when somebody's funding something, they kind of have a say to a certain degree. So I can definitely see that.
And I know this is like switching gears as far as like priority, but it's certainly boils down to the couple and like their comfort level with their family. But I think as long as like bride and groom are like very united on what they want, but they also, I think, need to have a real conversation with each other of like, what are we going to do? How are we going to respond if, your mom starts to like quip at us about not inviting XYZ? I think like I think it's like such a good test in what your marriage is going to be like. I was just
going to say that a united front, it's a perfect example of what, like, the first test of your marriage. You guys should be together because once you get married, conversations need to be happening between you guys first before you bring in mom and dad. Those are outside characters now.
100%. And again, like that's kind of outside of like my scope as like a wedding planner, but it is something that I think is so important because I have seen how family dynamics
I'm sure.
make planning, it robs couples of the joy of like getting married. And there's
Mm-hmm.
certainly been couples, and it makes me sad where they're like, I'm just ready for this to be over.
Yeah.
That's what really is like
Because they're trying
heartbreaking
to
to me.
appease everybody else. So what is your advice for like setting boundaries with family members who are being like overbearing? Or I remember my mom, like we were going to plan for a big wedding and we dialed back and we got married in like 3 months and had a small.
Did you really?
We did. I had a small wedding so my dad could walk me down the aisle. It was perfect.
Love
I
that.
loved it. It was still almost 20 grand just having a small wedding, which is crazy to me. But even my mom was like, can we invite this person, this person? I have this friend. And I'm like, Mom, I don't even know those people. And I can't even imagine that how that level would change once you are planning a 300-person wedding.
Oh.
And guest list can increase significantly.
I mean, I have a bride right now who like her venue's capacity, if she watches this, it's gonna be super funny. I love her. I love her. And she knows she's ridiculous in some ways, but like her max capacity is like 300. And I said, okay, hey, like, what's your, like, do you finally have your guest list done? And she's like, Tara, it's 370 people. And I was like, okay, like if my math is math, and if we say like 13% of people don't show up, like
Yeah.
we're on the cusp here.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's crazy how that just grows.
Do you have to play bad guy sometimes, or mediator? Maybe not bad guy, but mediator between your couple and the family, just to kind of like help buffer?
I mean, I've certainly had a wedding that I've like told the bride and like the mother of the groom that they needed to cut their guest list.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Different kind of mediation, but just what the
rules of the venue.
The rules of the venue, where I said, I said, hey, like, I know you're stressed right now about who you're going to cut because, these people matter, or, you feel that weird obligatory feeling of, well, if I invite this person, then I have to invite these like 10 other people. Mm-hmm. And I said, would you rather feel stressed right now cutting people, or are you going to be stressed 30 days out from your wedding? And I go to you, so how are we fitting all these people in your venue?
Mm-hmm. And then people are uncomfortable because they're elbow to elbow.
Yeah. And I certainly try to approach wedding planning from a hospitality standpoint of like, I very much believe, and I think the clients that I work with get it too, that the wedding day is about bride and groom, that they're getting married, and it's about them, of
Mm-hmm.
course. But I say it also matters, and it matters about the people that you're inviting to. And, I always say, like, how would you feel if you were a guest at a wedding and the couple kind of actually went over capacity and you're like in the nosebleed, so to speak?
Mm-hmm.
Like, you probably wouldn't be thrilled, like, because then I feel like you would feel like an afterthought.
Right.
And I'm very real with people and I think it's just because, again, they don't always see, people are just compassionate and they like don't want to hurt people's feelings. And I really try to walk that line of be empathetic, but also real, and say, correct, like, directly tell people,
yes,
do you want to be more stressed 30 days out, or we're stressed 7 months out?
Mm-hmm. I think another good workaround is if you do have 2 locations, say if your reception's at a different place and you're having a church ceremony, invite those people to the ceremony. That doesn't mean that they have to be at the reception as well. You can still include them in the ceremony.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, or I even have couples that do like opposite, and they do 20 people at their ceremony, mm-hmm, and then a bigger reception. Yeah. I mean, I was a guest like that before at one of my friends from high school. I wasn't even invited to the ceremony, but I got invited to the reception.
Yeah. So there's workarounds.
Yeah, there's workarounds to anything. But as far as you asked about like mediation and all of that, I mean, I'll be honest, in my role, very rarely do I have parents sitting down at meetings with me. I get the occasional mom or dad that might attend like a meeting or two just because they're nosy and they're
or excited and they just want to be a part of it. Yeah, I feel like that's going to be me as a mom. I'm going to be like, yes, hi, I used to be a wedding photographer 50 years ago.
Yeah. You're curious, and you want, especially if you're giving and you care, and you may be giving money, and you just want to make sure, like, you're cutting a check for this, $8,000 photographer, which is a lot of money. And then you're like, so who's this Joe Schmo that you've hired? And I found like sometimes a parent just like wants to be like, okay, like
they just want to be.
They know what they're talking about. Like, this
that's a good piece of advice. So if you do have a family member or a mom or a dad that does want to be involved in like an initial meeting, maybe don't squawk. Just maybe let them come and get a comfort level. They need to build trust with your vendor, just like, you would as a bride or a groom.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Like I said, squawk.
Right.
Squawk about it. But I mean, as far as like mediation goes in particular, I always tell couples like I'm not like a licensed like clinical psychologist or anything. Like I'm not a counselor.
We have to wear many hats in the wedding industry.
Yes, but I try to be sensitive and I try to walk people through things. But I always say like it's however you want to handle it. But I give like, I think when something comes up, it's my personal values that come forward of like, this is what I think.
Yeah.
But like you can do as you please with how to handle it.
Yeah.
So now there's definitely things in terms of family dynamics I forewarn them about. I think maybe you would agree too as a photographer. I always say there's usually two particular things that like get parents in an uproar. One is family photos.
Family photos.
Family photos give parents, moms in particular, an uproar.
The worst part of the day. Necessary, so important. But
it's the necessary evil of a wedding day.
Yeah.
And I really try to be proactive, and photographers are generally like really good about this. And I try to be proactive with them of like, we're getting a family shot list and we're gonna write out every single combination. And I'm like, let's stew for a little bit.
Yeah.
And I said, show it to mom. At least show it to mom, because mom's going to say, oh, you forgot so-and-so, or they're, or especially like in divorce family situations, they might say, I don't feel comfortable
standing next to so-and-so.
Yeah. And I think it's just respect for family.
Yeah. I try to head that on in the get-go. I send a questionnaire out before weddings, and that includes that family shot list and basically a template of like what I would include. But I'm always like, hey, are there any dynamics in your family that I need to know about? Are mom and dad divorced? Are they together? Do they have a significant other or a new spouse that I need to include? And then I'm like, once we have that list and all the names and all the groupings, show it to your family members, because they could arise where it's like mom's like, I don't want to be in a photo with her, or maybe they don't care.
Yeah, or it's the sibling's long-term boyfriend or whatever. And
oh, that is the most awkward. I've actually had it at a wedding day where they included the boyfriend of like the sister of the groom, and then we snapped the photo, and then they told him to get out of the photo. And I'm just standing there with my camera like, this is so awkward.
You would like to think that person, that boyfriend, girlfriend, whomever, like gets it.
I hope they have a good sense of humor, but yeah.
So I mean, I've certainly been to weddings where we're like rattling off names and they've like double checked it. I always do like the week of the wedding. We always look over it one more time.
Yeah.
And I've certainly been like at a wedding and they're like, oh my God, I forgot like so-and-so, like, can we see? I'm like, of course. Or like, it's fine. It happens. We're human.
It does.
So I always say that's like a family dynamic. I was like, if you want to get in front of like people squawking at your wedding, just like be up front and just like go over with people. I'm like, it's so minor.
Yeah.
And then this is more on the groom side. Like if there's a mother present that, isn't deceased or isn't estranged or anything, I'm like, please ask your mom if she wants you to walk her down the aisle.
Yeah.
Like, cause mother of the groom, they have such a small role, but it's like their baby boy most of the time.
Yes.
And so I'm like, just ask your mom. Cause I bet 9 times out of 10, she's going to say, yeah, could you?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like sometimes the mother of the groom is kind of overlooked, but she plays a small role. And I always try to like take time to get that boutonniere photo with her and her son, because it's so important. Like everybody does need to have like this little cameo throughout the wedding day.
Yeah. So those are like the two major like things that I've observed over the last 7 years now in total doing weddings of just, it's like little thoughtful things to kind of help avoid potential conflict, but it's not going to change your wedding day. Like it's still about you, but you're taking the time to think about somebody else's feelings in a very minor way.
Very much so. Yeah. And just like showing them a list and being like, hey, you're on this list, stick around. Because I feel like it's always like Uncle Tom left the ceremony and he's like in this family shot list and nobody told him.
Or it's like that wedding you and I had where we're struggling with weather and we're like corralling all the family all over the place trying to find a break in the rain with all these people.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
The big extended, that's a whole other beast.
Yeah. So. The weather and having backup plans, that's also an important topic. Just planning, because you can never trust the weather. It changes on a dime and you can't predict it.
No. Well, I'm sure you'll probably eventually ask me this question about like hardest weddings I've ever done or something to that effect.
Let's get into it.
But,
what's the worst thing that's ever happened?
I've had lots of hard things. I mean, there's like the minor thing. I say minor, but like I've had like ambulances called because like grandma falls, like, she's bleeding from her head. Like, like ambulances have been called before.
I've had a bridesmaid just I guess she locked her knees in the ceremony and she just fainted.
Yes, I've had that happen too.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Oh, it wasn't a knee locking, but it was a groomswoman, and she was on some new medication, and ceremony was outside, blazing heat, and I guess like the medication and I don't know I don't know all the pharmaceuticals, but it counteracted, and she just like fell down, and like the whole rest of the day she was just miserable, like cool towel, just kind of like was in a daze the rest of the day. I mean, so this goes into like backup plans and everything, but I had a wedding last year, like one of my favorite weddings I've ever worked on, but it was one of the hardest I've ever done. It was at a like basically like an outdoor like concert venue. So like kind of think of like Hollywood Casino in a way, but like there's like a little bit of a building, but it can only fit like, you could maybe do like 110 seated if you're lucky. Mm-hmm. And this was 130, 140 people. And it's in July. And being a Midwesterner, July is a crazy month for thunderstorm or scattered thunderstorms, so very unpredictable weather.
Yeah.
And, obviously I had encouraged the couple to consider getting a tent, because I was like, what do we do if there is poor weather? Like your indoor, like the indoor space is not an option for your guest count, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So, we did the tent, and glad we did, because as the weather was like changing throughout the week, the groom was like, I'm so glad that we decided just to like bite the bullet and pay for this. But had a great vendor team. We're setting up, everything seems fine, a little drizzle, whatever. And then all of a sudden on the radar map, like a big red dot shows up on the map. And I was like, oh no, like
red's never good.
Red's never good. And we're like all setting up. And then all of a sudden it was just like torrential downpour, but like even worse, like wind. And so everything that was like under the tent, like I kid you not, Danielle, it was just blowing. And so florist, my team, like we had a vintage rental company that was doing the styling, and the venue, we're all running all over this park, essentially like trying to just gather everything, like things are breaking and all that. And so we like run, grab everything we can, and like we're sitting in the concert venue. And, it's only, I don't know what time of day it is. It's like 1 o'clock, maybe. Ceremony is at, I don't remember, 5 or something. Mm-hmm. And, I'm the planner, and everyone's like, kind of like, everyone's trying to like
everything's fine.
I'm sitting and I'm trying to like collect my thoughts. Like I'm like regrouping, like, okay, Terra. So like, we've got to get this done. We got great people to do this. And so I'm like, okay, like this is what we're going to do. Like, is everyone feel? So I'm just like,
you're doing your job,
my job, and grateful that all the vendors on this particular wedding are like team players and just like knocked it out of the park. And this is a tent that didn't have walls. And so the venue's like getting tarps for us, and they're like zip tying tarps around the tent just so that we can like maintain the integrity of what's under the tent.
Yeah.
And like, unfortunately the final layout was like not what we had hoped for. It was very much like kind of cramming people as we could, but it was all that we could do, and we had to change the processional. It couldn't have happened to a better client that just like they understood the kind of venue that they booked, and that this would be a potential challenge.
So the weather bled into the ceremony then?
It stopped. So it basically horrible storm happened. We regrouped, and it was just like a drizzle the rest of the day, and it drizzled up until like the ceremony started, and then it was like hot and humid the rest of the day. But it was, one of my favorite weddings. The couple got great photos out of it because it's overcast all day. Their portraits are beautiful.
Absolutely.
But just, I think that in particular goes to show like the value of even just having like a professional vendor team.
Mm-hmm. And a planner to bring everybody together too, because you really need that liaison between every single vendor, or everybody's gonna be running around with their heads cut off.
Well, I joke the florist and the rental company. I'm very good friends with them, and I said we joke about it, and I'm like, what would, like, in this situation, if I wasn't here, my team wasn't here to support, like, what would you all do? And they're like, Terra, it would have been chaos, because who is the leader on site?
Yeah, who's in charge?
Who's the leader, and who's kind of taking the blunt of what happens, like who's making the decision. Not that one of them wouldn't have stepped up, because that's not what I'm saying. And I don't think that they would say that, but
But each vendor has their job and they are the lead of their own personal job. Like the florist handles the flowers and you are overseeing all of that. And I think that is the difference between a planner and all your different vendors is the planner is really the overarching person that makes everything come together.
Yeah. Now, granted, I'm sure some planners that are well beyond me would say, well, why? There could have been a better plan. But it was one of those things where
you got to work with your vendor.
I had to work with what the client was willing to book.
Yeah.
So I'm at the mercy of the client in some way. Not blame, but like, like we can only book so much. And then the venue could only fit a certain size tent. So I had to work around that.
Yeah.
And, we weren't going to wait. Like there was no storm clouds in sight, but we knew it was scattered storm. So it was a risk, but like, we got to get started on this.
Yeah.
We got to start.
Yeah. Sometimes you can't just manifest something out of thin air. You just got to work with what you have.
Yeah. So, I mean, we pulled it together and we got it done just in time, like literally just in time, like got it done just in time. Because it's a very detailed, like layered wedding with lots of things on the tables and such. But
they say rain is good on your wedding day. It's good luck.
Although
I've had a bride say, I don't want good luck on my wedding day. I don't want it to rain.
I mean, you know what? Probably the worst experience though, outside of it's always weather. I'm getting more jaded about outdoor weddings these days. The worst was fortunately it was an indoor reception, but the ceremony was outdoor in this kind of like amphitheater. And, the venue needed to call at, I think 11 a.m. about rain plans. And, I always check with the couple, hey, here's what the weather's saying. We're happy to do either way, but here's the risk, all those things. And it was like 30% chance of rain. So bride was like, let's do it outside. I was like, great. And then it's like an hour and a half before and another red dot pulls up on the map. I'm like, oh no.
You have PTSD. You're like, not again.
Well, that wedding happened first.
Okay.
So that wedding was in 22. And then this one with the tent was last year. So it was actually this original wedding in the amphitheater. As soon as the ceremony started, it's like the photos from the wedding are like fantastic because it's pouring, wind is blowing. I think one of the groomsmen's like holding the arbor because it's just like it's horrible storm.
Did they stay up there at the altar?
Oh, they cut like their unity ceremony and they did it at the reception instead because it was sopping wet.
Goodness.
We had things, DJs like trying to cover their stuff.
Absolutely.
And
here's my advice to couples who, if you are on your ceremony site, you're outside and it starts pouring on you, go with it. You're already going to get wet. Your photographer's already there photographing those photos of you guys like laughing and running in the rain. At least laugh and run in the rain back into the venue because you might actually love those photos. Like I've seen photos of couples where that's happened to them.
Yeah.
And they just run back inside and they're laughing and giggling and the photographer's getting all those photos and they're actually really beautiful moments. And you're going to look back and laugh.
They're
honestly.
some of my favorite photos to look at just because like the guests are sitting, and some of them had umbrellas and some of them, it's Danielle, you should see these photos. Like they're sopping wet.
Oh,
no. So anyways, I used that experience to tell this couple last July, like, this is what happened. And I highly advise a tent.
No kidding.
Not that, yes. Anyways, those are like the word. It always seems to be weather tends to be the biggest challenge. I've even had a wedding where like the bride wanted like a white aisle runner down the aisle and it was on concrete and, it came with like great, like double-sided tape stuff that really should hold up well, but it was so windy and that sucker was not going to stay. So we had to like make adjustments and it wasn't ideal. But so that's like my hard job as a planner is when do I say we tried and we can't execute this or, we try and it's not 100%. That's always the hardest part for me. And I've definitely have made always the dang aisle runner. I definitely made a decision a couple years ago that the timing of when the aisle runner was like set was not what the bride had imagined. And she wasn't upset or anything. She was like, that's just not like what I had envisioned. So like, A, I know to ask the question now. And B, I was like very heartfelt with her. I said, when I was like thinking about when this was happening, this made more sense to me, like in the flow of how things would happen. But I totally understand like what you were envisioning. So a little bit of a different situation. That just boils down to communication on my end.
Absolutely. Well, it's hard. Like, this is their wedding day. It's so important. So as a bride, like you really do have to kind of manage your expectations and know that, you could go into your wedding day and everything could go to shit. But just remember that the marriage is what's really the most important part. So don't worry about the aisle runner. It might not be perfect. You're still going to walk down the aisle and marry your person. The candles might fall over. They might drip and ruin your linens, but it's fine.
Yeah. I had a mother of the bride this year say, she's so sweet. We were talking about rain because it was a tinted wedding. And she's like, if something happens, you're just making memories.
Exactly.
That's what Mom said.
I love it. She's like a positive Patty.
Mom was so positive.
Just making memories.
Because there really wasn't a great, like the indoor space would not have fit the capacity of the wedding. And so Mom was
really
like,
the attitude you have to go into it with.
And that, honestly, as a planner, I think setting expectations is the hardest part of my job, actually. It could boil down to expectations on like what things cost. It could be expectations on like how does a day really unfold, meaning like how much time do things take.
What is the most expensive part of the wedding that couples are most surprised about?
Most surprised by everything. No.
Yeah, literally.
I mean, I want to say like food, but I think they know that food's going to cost. Well, actually, I am going to say food anyways. So like a full service caterer that is like bussing tables and everything, you're paying a lot of what you're paying for is labor. Mm-hmm. So you might say, oh, like the plate, $22 a person, $23 a person, but then you add 22% service fee or plus gratuity, plus tax, like that adds up really, really fast. Mm-hmm. I know that there's caterers that can do it for, $15 a person. Generally speaking, you're probably not getting, like you're probably doing disposables and they're not bussing your tables.
And you're not getting the quality either.
Potentially, because if you think, in today's day and age, like think about going to like Chick-fil-A, it's hard to get out of there without spending $20 on like 23. I don't know how much, I don't go to Chick-fil-A often, but like it's expensive. So it is hard. It's like wrapping my head around when people kind of balk at pricing of food. And I go, well, if you think about like a sit down at any, even like a chain restaurant, like a Longhorns or something, you're still probably paying $18 a plate, but then, you're paying for service too, for sitting there.
Very true.
So I do think that's what adds up very quickly. If you have 200 people times $25 a person plus, whatever your tax rate is, but,
and then the cost of the bar, drinks as well.
Yeah. I mean, at least in Missouri, I have a lot of planner friends like throughout the states, and how we do things in Missouri. It's very wild, wild west. It depends on your location. Like in mid Missouri, you can do like bring in your own alcohol a lot of times. And sometimes the venue doesn't require licensed and insured bartenders. So like your bar tab could be super. Your bar tab could be
do that
real
need to
cheap.
Be stopped.
And then you go to somewhere like St. Louis and it's like, you can have your bar open for like 5-hour max and that is it. And it's consumption based or bar package and that is it. And you can't get your alcohol from anywhere else. Mm-hmm. And so, I guess that is one thing to consider. Like when you're at the beginning of the planning process is thinking about too, like how much like DIY are you willing to do? Yeah. Because it's been said to me by a planner for like, you can do anything in the wedding industry, but it's going to come with a price. So, if you're looking from like a DIY, you could bring in your own vendors and stuff. You might have to do a little bit more research on where you're getting married. I have my experience. Be out in the
country.
my experience, I do weddings throughout the entire state, and my experience is in like metro cities, the rules are a lot tighter.
Absolutely, because you're in the city and nobody wants that liquor liability, because if anything happens wrong, it's going back on the venue. Mm-hmm. And they could get sued to high heaven.
Yeah. Where if you're like, I want to, bring in whatever and I don't care about, caterers bussing tables.
Somebody could leave your wedding and if you bring in your own alcohol, somebody could leave your wedding and get in a wreck or kill somebody, and then it could be back on you. You do not want that as the bride or the groom.
Yeah, no. And not every venue, most venues, but not all like require additional insurance on top of what their insurance is, just kind of help with that protection. But I guess. Yeah, Danielle, I think catering is really the biggest. But they're like shocked by at this point.
What shocked me is the florals. Florals costing so much. I had a bouquet and it was white roses and white orchids and it was like a cascading bouquet. It was pretty large, $800.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I will be honest, that is like on the very high end of,
It was insane. I loved it. It was beautiful, but the flowers always blow my mind how expensive they are.
well, and I've had this situation, I had this situation happen this year with a bride, this year that, the original florist that they were going to use, I think the bridal bouquet was like 600, 650, something like that. And it was like one on the higher end of I've ever seen. Cause I told her, I was like, generally speaking, I see anywhere from like 250 to 350 for a bridal bouquet. So I was like, it's 50% more. And so like dug in a little bit deeper. And this is where it's important for, if you're not going to hire a planner, like you really need to be able to like advocate for yourself, or you're going to have to do a little bit extra research. But the reason like that, and I talked to some floral friends to kind of figure out like why there was such a range. And, cause I asked my floral friends like, hey, cause this is a florist I had never worked with. And I said, hey, bride showed this picture and this is the quote that I'm getting. Like, am I missing something? Or like, do I not know something about my job? And
Yeah.
and they're like, well, this particular bouquet has a lot of premium luxury florals in it. So I guarantee that florist who's quoting it is going literally based off this picture. But in order to reduce the cost, we can use nice blooms, but they're not like luxury where you're paying a premium price per stem. And I was like, okay,
Yeah.
like that totally makes sense to me. But like, client didn't know. She didn't know to ask, and it was never said. Not that the florist was trying to withhold information, because that's not the. I really don't think that was the intention. But
She was just going off
when
the
you're
picture.
presented with a picture,
Yeah.
and maybe there was no budget attached, like this is my budget for florals. I think as an artist and a creative, you're like, okay, this is what they're showing, so they want it to look like this, and it shows peonies and all these things.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, yeah, I think flowers are fair, and I think it's with anything. It's like any business, if it's construction, attorneys, whatever. Like you don't know the business till you're in it. So people think flowers, and they might buy their flowers from like Trader Joe's or whatever, and it's relatively inexpensive.
Yeah.
But what I found, most things in the wedding industry, you're paying for people's time and their labor, because like I'll advocate for my floral friends here. Like they create these proposals. It's not like they're coming up with these prices out of thin air. They are doing research on types of flowers that are going to be in season. What's it going to cost? What are their recipes going to be? Meaning like, what's the combination of flowers that they're going to use to put together your arrangements? And how does that boil down per piece like what's the cost?
And the install.
And all of that. And then delivery fees, their design fee, if they have hard goods. So anything like a vase or, pins for boutonnieres or whatever. Like there's a lot of extra little costs. And then of course, I couldn't tell you how many florists, their biggest nightmares is dealing with like shipments of like things getting lost in the mail. I've had florist friends, their shipments get accidentally delivered to like the wrong florist, just because FedEx, they deliver for how many florists, and they accidentally grab a package that says florals and they end up like at the wrong florist shop, and then they got to coordinate and figure out, okay, I got to get this packaging.
Absolutely.
And then of course the florists, they get all this product in, and let's say it's like a $10,000 floral budget. That's a lot of product that they have to go through. Like if it's like roses, they're clipping thorns, they're like taking and they're prepping everything. So there's so much that happens that you're paying their time for. And certainly with anything in wedding, you can save money by doing it yourself, but it goes like at what cost?
Correct.
Like I've had I love moms sometimes. I certainly love moms. One of my very first weddings I ever did, I think it was like to save money, but the mom bought linens from like a friend that had like their daughter had gotten married, and they're like really inexpensive, like polyester, and so they had to like steam them, press them, whatever.
Yeah.
And
I can only picture mom with her beautiful dress on trying to steam these linens.
and I obviously, like, I wasn't hired to like help with any of this, and I am a newbie planner, and I remember like mom saying like, I just wish I would have paid for someone. Or I had a bride this year, she like has these beautiful invitations. It's like multi-layer with like a bow and everything. And I talked to her recently, and she's like, the groom was like, we should have just paid the stationer just to assemble these. Like that would have been worth its weight. And sometimes you like just don't know. I know you want to save money. I know, but Like,
The less you can worry about on your wedding day, the better.
yeah. I mean, yeah, just in general, if people are like looking to save money, obviously doing something yourself will save you money.
Mm-hmm.
But I have found often I hear, if they're hiring me, I often hear I should have just paid someone to do this.
Yeah.
Because it's a lot of time. You have a full-time job, you're in school, you're moving, you're whatever. And it is so much extra. And then those typically are the clients that go, I'm just ready for this to be here.
Yeah.
And it's like,
which I get, it becomes a job for them.
Yeah. I mean, it's my job. Like, you know what I mean? I do this full time, 40 hours a week.
All this information is just, it perfectly illustrates why having a planner is so important.
Yeah. And I understand though too, not everyone's budget can afford for, to hire professionals to do everything. And I guess that's like,
is there different like layers to your services, or like, do you even believe in day of coordination, or what is the difference between a day of coordinator and a wedding planner?
I remember Renee Dallow. I don't know if you follow Renee. She's a planner out in California, has said this, and she has said day of coordination doesn't exist. I agree. Now, okay, I will say this. Like venues in particular, like will offer like a day of coordinator. Sometimes it depends. It's usually, they sometimes will. And what they mean by that is it's someone that's there for 6 hours maybe. And they're just there. Well, so like there's one venue in particular, like in St. Louis area, that like offers day of coordinator. It's inclusive. And it's like if someone doesn't have a planner, but they're literally just there to like get you down the aisle. And maybe some like the minor decor that you have to set up, but then like they're there for 6 hours and they leave. And I will say this, some clients, maybe that's all that they need. Well, like that's all they need. Like their wedding is very kind of like, black and white. Like it's not, what I would call like a production. Like it's very streamlined. It's very, cut and dry. There's nothing like,
maybe
too
they only
crazy.
have like less than 100 guests.
Yes. But, all that I say, like day of coordination, like I offer day of coordination, but it's more than just that, because anybody who's going to sell you, I can like just show up on your wedding day and like kind of keep things moving, I think is disingenuous. I think it's not genuine, or they as the business owner are doing a disservice to themselves because they're still meeting with the client in advance in some capacity, or they're doing some sort of correspondence to kind of know. But I think that's what I hear from vendors is one of their biggest complaints about working with planners are the ones that kind of like advertise the day of, and then they're like, they're more in my way. Like the vendors, like they're more in my way than they were helpful because they're so far removed from the process.
Exactly. They haven't been a part of those conversations that are prior to the wedding day. And there's so much that goes into planning a wedding day. There's so many conversations and emails and back and forth, and you have to communicate with vendors. You can't just show up on a wedding day and expect everything to run smoothly.
100%. The longer I've been doing this, I don't want to say pickier, but like I can see where the ball gets dropped, not on the event, like on the client side of things, and then how the whole event kind of suffers, or like it's harder on vendors. And I feel like, at least for me, I kind of see myself like I work for both the client, but I also work for the vendor. And the planners are probably going to hate me for saying that. But for me, at least how I conduct my business is I work for both. The client's the one that's paying me, but I want to make sure that both parties feel supported and that I'm not adding, issues, or I'm only like caring about the client.
You're like I want mama hen and you got all your kids running around.
Yeah. It's so, for me, like, at this point in my business, now going into 7 years of doing weddings, doing something that's like more of like a month of coordination, I don't do anymore because my job's harder. Because I find there's a lot of gaps that I'm filling. And I want to be a helper, and I see people get stressed, like clients get stressed, and they hired me just to do like coordination only, which I should caveat this. Like when someone hires me for like just coordinate, or how it has been, it's like I'll do like a timeline meeting with them. They'll get some planning resources from me in advance, but I'll do a timeline meeting. We'll sit down, talk through everything. I get an opportunity to ask questions and just get like, say, hey, this doesn't make sense. Can you explain this, like what you're envisioning, so that I like know? And then I will always confirm details with the vendor team, meaning, hey, so-and-so, I'm day of coordinator, event manager, whatever. And Joe and Melody said that you're doing this service for them. Is this true? I'm just making sure everything's correct. But like there's day of coordinators that don't even do that, which is crazy to me. I would never do that. But then that, and then like the day of, and like I have found like that's not enough help depending on the bride. I definitely have like some really type A brides that are really good at planning, but I've kind of started to dig my heels in and just say, I have to be a little bit more involved because my reputation's on the line. And I just I want to feel comfortable too, that you feel supported.
Yeah. So they kind of want to like manage who you're communicating with and how much to kind of like save money or like.
Yeah. So like this month of coordination package that I have offered previously I did it as a way to compete with some of the planners that don't charge a lot. Because I was like missing out on bookings. And so I was like, I got to come with a package that's like $2,100 or less. So how am I going to do this? And I came up with this package, and I've done it a few times, and I don't like it.
You've learned that it doesn't serve your clients.
It doesn't serve my client. And then I feel like I look like the asshole when I have a vendor that's like asking me a question, and then I have to say my hands are really tied because I am so far removed from this. I only know what the client has told me. And I was not part of any planning conversations. I couldn't like kind of like get involved a little bit earlier to kind of like, and so it's just, yeah. And it boils down to people don't plan events for 100+ people often.
Yeah. I think that goes back to the value of just a planner and being a part of those conversations. So if you do want to hire a planner and you feel like they're a little bit more expensive and you want to dial them back, I would strongly suggest against that, because having them be a part of those conversations can mitigate chaos later down the road.
Yeah. It's such a weird position for me to be in, because I certainly have my vendor friends that again, they don't hire me, right? So the client's hiring me, but in my position, I feel like I work for both. And certainly I have my vendor friends that get frustrated when like a planner gets involved the week of, and they're like, and what really irks, I don't know if this has happened to you, that what really irks them is they've generally, like a photographer, videographer, have already talked timeline in advance with the client, of course. And a planner comes in the week of, and then that timeline is different. And they're like, wait a minute, I had this conversation 45 days ago. Where have you been? And
Definitely
it
happened
kind of,
before.
and it kind of,
I always kind of just send like, hey, here's the photo timeline. This is kind of what we discussed earlier. But yeah, it can propose some problems because we've already crossed that off the to-do list, and now we're talking about it again.
And you as a business owner, you're like, I'm wasting my time. Like, and I find it's sometimes the client just doesn't know, they weren't educated, or it is kind of like they were kind of not a bulldog, but they have in their head that day of coordination, that's all I need. That's all the people have told me I need. So I found someone who does it, but then I like shame on the planner that tells me inexperience that you don't really know what you're doing. For me, it's, it's like a team sport. Like doing weddings is a team sport. And so, you are the expert in your profession. So it's like an attorney you don't go to a lawyer and you tell them how to do their job. You don't tell a teacher how to do their job necessarily. And I feel like that more I've done this, I'm like, you as the client don't get to tell me what the expectation is out of my job. So if I know that like a photographer, videographer will want to have a conversation well in advance to talk about timeline, that you're going to hire me and I'm going to be explicit and say, this is what happens at this like month mark. And, I did that with you at our wedding is, back in June, is I'll have a conversation with a client about timeline. I'll ask them, I'll say, have you already talked about timeline with your photographer? It's 50-50 if they have or not. Cause every photographer works at a different pace on when they even like look at it. And so I generally will help with it because it's often because they're trying to pick a ceremony time for their invites. So I'll help them with that. But then I always say, hey, I'm going to maybe put together 2 different timelines, maybe 3, just depends on a lot of different circumstances. And I said, I'm going to kick it to your photographer and I'm going to have them look at it because I want to make sure that they feel comfortable because I don't dictate how they work.
Yeah.
So like, like, I don't know if this photographer is going to like, if they have a second shooter, if they feel comfortable with their second shooter doing things on their own, like doing the guys while the lead's doing the bride. Yeah. So I always say I have to ask them first because it's not my place to tell them how to do their job. And then I have found that photographers in general, they might say, oh, I already have a timeline, or I didn't know that you had like when I originally did timeline, they didn't tell me that they were doing like first look with dad. Like, great, I'll add that in or whatever. Like so, cause I
usually that's what it is. It's like simple things that are added in, like a bridesmaid's first look with dad, or I need like 30 more minutes for details. Sometimes brides are like, oh, you only need like 15 minutes to get all my details. And I'm like, no, sweetie, I need a full hour.
Yeah, it takes time. So for me, it's so like, yes, that's like part of like the day of coordination, but like the scope, and we're all busy. So sometimes I'm like following up with a photographer for like a couple weeks, or like we're going back and forth, or
there's sometimes like different iterations.
And
which is totally normal. Like, and it's normal to have multiple timelines on a wedding day. I always say like the planner is going to have a timeline. The DJ is going to have a timeline. The photographer and the videographer, we're all going to have timelines as long as they all like jive.
Yes. As long as they all match. So So the long and short to answer your question, Danielle, day of coordination, it's something that happens on the day of, but it's beyond just like hiring someone to show up on your day. And I think a good planner knows that.
And persuade you against it too.
Yeah. And I certainly have lost business because I know I'm not cheap either, but and I also tell people, I can tell a newer planner if they're the only person on site. So like, there's a lot of different variables to how many people I bring on site, but it's anywhere from like me and 2 and me and 5. Like, it just depends on a lot of different things. And I always say if a planner's on the day of by themselves, that tells me that they're either inexperienced or like they are really doing like the bare minimum, because I couldn't tell you, like on a wedding day, I get pulled in so many different directions and I have to delegate to people.
Yes.
So, and I always try to communicate that like when you're hiring me, it's not just me, like you're paying, it's that hidden like labor fee that people don't realize. You're paying for me to have my team there.
Yeah.
I certainly have had people say, you don't like, no, I've only had this happen once. It was when I first started my business where a bride was like, oh, we don't need all those extra people. I'm like, well, I need them to do my job for you. Correct. That you're hiring me for.
Yeah, it's much better to just turn away clients instead of bending and knowing that you're not going to be able to serve them or something's going to happen. And much better to just turn them away and say, this is my pricing. This is how I work. And if you value that, then I'd love to work with you. Yeah. Simple as that.
And I don't know if this is something a question you would ask, but it's something I'm thinking about as we're having this conversation is, like any vendor category, like no 2 entities are the same. So like no 2 florists are the same. Generally we're doing like similar jobs. So I'll speak like planners, like planning. There's such a wide range of like what we do and then the experience that we bring on site. And I recently just launched a new website with new copy and everything.
I saw that. Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you. It was time. It's go away from my DIY website. So, hire the professionals to do things, right?
Right. I just hired a designer to design mine as well. I do have a design background, but even then I'm like, I just need somebody else
on the outside
to handle this. Yes, on the outside. Exactly.
So, a planning mentor of mine, had recommended a book for just like a general, like a book to read. And so I've encouraged the girls that work for me to read this book. And I said, if you read this, I'll pay them obviously for their time to do this. And, I said, if you read this, I want 2 to 3 different takeaways that we could potentially implement on the day of. And everything is rooted in hospitality. And so, as like a differentiator. I'm sharing my secret sauce, but like for me as a planner, I go above and beyond in terms of like leading up to the wedding, how involved I am, because it's that extra sense of security that I want to give the client. And I also want, I have to be the leader on the day of. So then I also want to make sure like the vendors feel like I'm competent in my job. But then the hospitality component is something that I'm trying to do a lot more of like, we're not just like keepers of time, but we are there to really like serve our clients and their like VIPs really well and really make it the buzzword luxury experience for them. So that they feel like really taken care of. So like in my copy, I talk about white glove service, like not lifting a finger. So like kind of what that looks like on the day of is something very simple. Other planners want to do this, great. I think it'll level everybody up. But like, even like during family photos, go grab the couple like a plate of apps and ask them what they want to drink and bring it to them.
Yeah. I love when planners do that. It's the little things that really go the extra mile, or set it at their dinner table so they can have food like waiting for them. It's the little things like that.
It's the little things. And unfortunately in my position, it's the things that go unnoticed, but the client feels it, and it's what they comment on afterwards. And I hope it's what they talk to their friends about after the fact. But it's for me on my team, it's how can we like honor and serve the people that are there, because this is like a once in a lifetime event. And and so that's, if there's something different about what I do, it's just like that day of experience that, how are we thinking ahead, or what's like the memory we want them to leave with? So, I don't know, that's so important to me. And that's also why I like charge a little bit more, because we are more of a and I always tell people on a consult, like we're comprehensive, like, full service, even in the day of coordination, like we're very comprehensive, because like, it's like the difference of going to like a Chanel store for like a handbag versus like Target and there's some and I'm not for everybody, and that's okay. But there's some people like they just want to go in, they want to get their like inexpensive $30 handbag. They don't want anyone to bother them. And like, that's great. Like I certainly have bought handbags like that, but then the people that go to like a Chanel or whatever, like a Louis Vuitton, they want someone to like take care of them, like kind of wait on them. They want like to like pull the bag like out of the glass case and like like it's just a very different and for me, the kind of experience, and it maybe has to do with my background like in the fashion world and like retail and like what does that look like, it's just a very like white glove is the only way I can describe it. It's we want to take care of her, and then two, it matters more because it's about a marriage and a wedding day.
Absolutely.
And why shouldn't you want to like feel like the true guest of honor?
Absolutely. You want to be the queen of your wedding day. And I love that whole take that you have on it and how you approach your wedding planning. And I think that's really the mark of a good wedding planner, is serving the couple and making sure that they're happy, because at the end of the day, this is a people business, and weddings are a very emotional thing. And so people want to be happy. They want to be less stressed and all that good stuff. So I love that. But final question.
Okay.
Do you have any tips for the bride on how she can prepare like the night of before the wedding day? Like, how, like what should she be eating? Like, should she get enough sleep? She should probably have an easy day the day prior, so she's like ready.
Oh, well, let me start this with, the biggest mistake that I see.
Getting drunk,
or having like a big, like after party after the rehearsal dinner.
Yeah. Just avoid alcohol the day prior.
Or just like have a simple drink. Cause, gosh, it boils down to people's personalities. Definitely get sleep. I have my fair share of brides that like, they have a hard time sleeping because they, I think they're worried about like oversleeping. So they'll wake up like bright eyed and bushy tailed at 4 a.m. and they can't go back to sleep.
Yeah.
Where I see the error happen is like when they stay out till like 11, midnight, whatever. And then their call time's at 5 a.m.
Got bags under the eyes and everything.
Yes. And, I could go down a whole other rabbit hole of things to think about when you're planning your wedding. Try to limit how much like you're like drinking the night before. Try to like get to sleep at a reasonable time. And that whole week of, try to do things that are relaxing if you can, whether it's, getting your nails done or whatever, just like try to be as relaxed as possible. And if you're not hiring a planner, like make sure you've delegated tasks to somebody else that is also kind of removed from the wedding. So like not necessarily like mom or something like that. Like, and make sure you do that pass off before the day of. And if you ideally could do it like a couple days before. So like your tub of decor or whatever, like your guest book, like pass that off to somebody, and somebody that's like really responsible, that like respects you and like understands you. I think that would help a lot. And then 2, our friends are our friends that are our bridesmaids and, mans of honors and all of that. But I would have a conversation with, it's all about expectations. Yeah. We talk about Bridezilla. I think if you can have like a nice conversation with your friends of like, hey, like, this really is important. Like, can we please like try to like watch our alcohol consumption? Mm-hmm. Because I have seen hungover bridesmaids like the day of the wedding, like ruin thing because they're like lethargic. They don't want to like sit in the chair to get their hair done. Yeah. And like the bride's just like eye rolling and like kind of upset. Yeah. And so now our friends are our friends. But yeah, I think if you can have those, like, if you feel comfortable, I know not everyone's a direct communicator, but if you can like try to set the expectations, and it goes back to like the unified front with your future spouse, even like setting expectations with them and like whoever's in their bridal party too, of like, what are you all doing? Mm-hmm. Are you staying out till 1 a.m.? Mm-hmm. Are you going to bed? And I think, yeah, like just making sure that you and your future spouse are on the same page of like those expectations for the next day, so that everyone's like, okay, we're going to rest.
That's a great piece of advice, because there's also nothing worse than finally getting to wedding party photos and everybody is just hammered and nobody can take direction. And then it takes like double the amount of time to get the photos done. Yeah. And the couple is just annoyed and everybody's just like, Well,
on the way over here, I was listening. I'm sure you watch. I won't name drop. Well, I guess I can. Do you care if I name drop a different podcast?
No, not at all.
I'm sure you've watched like the vendor table podcast.
I love the vendor table.
So I was listening to it, and they were talking about like Gen Zers and how they're changing the wedding industry, but they were specifically talking about wedding party, and they were mostly calling out wedding party and saying, get your act together.
Yeah.
Quit drinking a ton before, like literally. It's 30 minutes of photos, 45, depending on the size of the wedding party, 30 minutes to 45 minutes. Just keep your act together.
Yeah. You'll be at reception like soon enough where you can like do all the drinking you want. Just show up for your people, cheer for them when they kiss, and then you're done.
Yeah. I tell you what, if there's another piece of wedding advice I'll give people is, oh God, this is hard, especially when you're a people pleaser. Really think about your wedding party.
Yeah.
Really, I have seen wedding parties.
We didn't even do a wedding party.
Didn't.
Nope.
My brother didn't either. I got married 5 years ago, and I had 5 bridesmaids, and 3 of them I talk to regularly. 1 I don't anymore. And the other one is like, she will always be like my friend I can call if I like need something, but I don't talk to her regularly. The other one, definitely we don't talk anymore. Yeah. And I have just seen wedding parties cause a lot of drama.
Yeah. Unnecessary drama. Like really think about the people that you want to choose. Yeah. Because they can take away from your day and how you show up, because especially if you're a people pleaser, you don't want to have to worry about everybody else, or, Sarah, because she's hungover and upset about her makeup or something. Like you really just want to focus on your day. And if you choose the wrong people, it can really take away from your joy on your wedding day.
Yeah. And that's a whole other topic of dealing with your, confrontation and conflict and risk aversion and all those things.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can't really help out with too much of that aspect. The only thing I know we need to go. The only thing I can say is, like if you hire me and you start to ask me questions, I'm an Enneagram 8, so I'm very direct with people. I'm very loyal to people, but I'll tell you like it is. So like if you don't want an honest answer, don't ask me. so if you're gonna hire me,
That's good though.
if you're gonna hire me,
She's blunt and honest.
I'm as gracefully as it's gotten better as I've gotten older. But if you're gonna hire me and you're gonna ask me a question about like wedding party or whatever, I'm gonna tell you exactly what I think and what I've seen.
That's what people need to hear, honestly.
Yep. And whether you listen to my advice or not is totally your thing, and I'll roll with it as it is. That's my personality, but I'm going to tell you like it is.
Yeah.
In a very kind, I think if any of my former clients or current clients listen to this, they'll go, yeah, like,
yeah,
Tara's going to tell me like it is.
I can see that for sure.
So
well, thank you so much for being here.
I hope that you have potential like brides and grooms listen to this and
absolutely
take away a couple good nuggets.
You guys, if you guys need a wedding planner, hire Terra. Where can they find you online?
Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram at Planet Terra. So it's PLANITTERRA. You can find me on Facebook. Do people even use Facebook? I don't know.
I think they do.
I don't know, but you can find me on Facebook, same thing. Or my website is, planetterra.com. Those are the best places. Or I'm on Pinterest. Same thing, Planet Terra.
Perfect. We'll link it in the show notes as well. So
amazing.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Danielle, for having me.